Okay, it's 2 minutes past, so I think we'll start. Hopefully everybody's here. And like I said, you can put into the chat where you're zooming in from today. There's quite a few different locations already present today, especially in Finland. So good afternoon, everybody. So just a warm welcome to everybody joining us today for this very special symposium that we've called Interspecies Wellbeing at Work. And this is presented by Project PAWWS, which stands for People and Animal Wellbeing in Work and Society. And this is our 4-year consortium project funded by the Research Council of Finland between the University of Lapland, Aalto University, and University of Helsinki. We're in year 2 now of 4 years, so we're going until the year 2027. So just keep that in mind when you're hearing the different work packages later on today. My name is Linda Tallberg, and on behalf of the whole project, I really hope that you enjoy our sessions today. Now, today we have PAWWS researchers that are going to share these initial points about the different specific focuses in the project. So we're in 3 different work packages from each university. And in addition to these work packages, we have actually 2 very exciting keynote speakers. We have Professor Jose Carlos Garcia Rosell speaking on green activities and tourism eco-labels. And then later today, we have Professor Kendra Coulter speaking about humane jobs. And then we also have a panel discussion where you have opportunities to ask questions, but you're very welcome to type your questions in as we go along, and we'll then read them out from the chat box if you prefer. But I guess I'll start with just saying a few words about the PAWWS project. We're very much starting with this starting point that the reality of animals is very much marginalized in our societies, even though they feature so much in our homes, organizations, and workplaces. The mainstream treatment and thinking of other species, such as animals, involves some of the most problematic aspects of humanity. And exploitation of animals is actually so widespread that for many this is taken for granted as just the way things are. And what we're trying to do in Project PAWWS is to move away from this view of seeing animals as resources for humans to exploit, and moving instead towards this more ethical thinking and relating in our multi-species communities. In Project PAWWS, we then develop these collaborations between the social and natural sciences, because some of us are organizational scholars, and then some of us are from the veterinary and social health sciences. But in a nutshell, the broad aim of the project is to understand multi-species well-being in different working contexts in integrate ways. And to do this, we focus on studying different aspects of dog work in Finland through these different cases related to, we have human health, such as pain detection and assistance dogs. And then we have in business things like the tourism industry of Lapland with the case of Sled dog industry. And you can see the schedule today there. Just a few notes on housekeeping. We'll have the speakers for the next hour and a half, followed by a video screening. And then you'll have the opportunity to ask questions from the speakers in the panel discussion. But as I said, you're more than welcome to already post the questions in the chat throughout the talk. So without further ado, we're very pleased to welcome our first keynote speaker, Professor Jose Carlos Garcia Rosell from Aalto University here in Finland. Jose Carlos is a business ethics professor and an expert in CSR, responsible management and tourism business. And he's worked many, many years in Lapland on different multi-species issues. Since 2016, he's been engaged in research on human-animal relations in tourism, with a very particular focus on animals working in the tourism industry in northern Finland. And through multi-stakeholder collaborations, his research has contributed to strengthening ethical practices in animal-based tourism, and he serves as a board member of the European Business Ethics Network and acts as a jury member for Green Key Finland, which is the organization behind Green Activities. Now, Green Activities is the first Finnish certificate for sustainable tourism to include animal welfare criteria for sled dogs and reindeer. So, Jose Carlos, we're very happy for you to join us today all the way from Peru and share your thoughts and experience. So please, you have the floor.
Hello, thank you for the introduction, Linda. And should I share my screen, or do you have this slide? Yeah, okay, let's see. Let's see if I can share. Okay, just give me a moment. Presentation.
I can also
If not, Tiamat has the slides as well.
Tiamat, yes, please. If you have the slides, yeah, because there are not many. So like, perhaps you can share it there. Yeah, because I have a computer that is a travel computer. It's not my own, and so yes, perfect. Yeah, it's great help. Yeah, today, so like, it's a pleasure to be here, and as Linda said, I'm joining today from Lima. So we have kind of 8 hours difference, kind of backwards from Finland. But yeah, pleasure to be here and talking about the topic, something we have been working for a long time at the University of Lapland, and still kind of many people there are also still working on the topic, and now also at the University of Oulu on the issue of interspecies kind of relationships in organizations, and especially in this case, kind of in relation to work done by different species in tourism. And yeah, and I kind of will talk about the kind of the path towards the Sled dog welfare criteria for the Finnish tourism industry. And tell kind of when kind of preparing the presentation, I was thinking kind of sorry how to structure it and whether to have it very structured or not. I thought maybe I tell the story behind the criteria and how it was established, and it's kind of very kind of a story I will tell that started actually in 2016. But before that, also I have to say that in 2013 there was already kind of talks in the tourism industry about animal welfare issues, and most of the topics were actually located or focusing on Asian countries, African countries, wildlife safaris, or aquarius, especially elephants. So what's the discussion about also elephants riding in tourism in Finland also. A lot of discussion about it, whether it's ethical or not. But the tension was in these regions. And maybe at that time, maybe as researchers, at that time I was working at the University of Lapland in the tourism degree, and also with my colleagues, we may have realized also these discussions, but we didn't think about how they are connected to animal work in the tourism industry in Finland, and especially in northern Finland. Yeah, because as we know, so like sled dogs, reindeer, horses are performing some type of work in the tourism industry in northern Finland. It's very important for the industry. Is something that attracts tourism to the region, to Lapland, Finnish Lapland in Finland. And but this was not until 2000, I think 14, 15, when some sled dog operators from Lapland, they were asking, actually, they approached the university and asking about we are doing some research about the topic, about animal welfare issues, or the ethics of working with animals, and so yeah, we actually at that time we didn't have an answer to that because we are not actually doing research related to animals. And it was also interesting for us to realize that the University of Lapland has a long tradition in research about sustainability issues and responsibility in tourism, but animals were not included in that research. And that was something that actually for us was eye-opening in that sense that, okay, we are missing something important here. And because of that, or because this kind of contact from the industry, we started kind of developing some research and development projects focusing on animal welfare in tourism, with a focus on reindeer, sled dogs, and horses. One of the projects was funded by Business Finland, and the other one by the European Regional Development Fund. And it was the first step then to start working on the topic. And we had to do actually a lot of work at the beginning with my colleagues at the University of Lapland, also the University of Applied Sciences, Lapland University of Applied Sciences, kind of because there was not information about the topic anywhere. In that sense about, for example, statistics about how many companies have animals in Lapland and where are the sled dogs working, how many sled dogs are working, or for example, about the attitudes, perception of tourism towards animal work in tourism in the region. So that is the work we started to do with the projects. And also one of the objectives, one of the projects was to create criteria, animal welfare criteria, for monitoring the welfare of these the animals or these species working in the tourism industry. It was a process that was based on an action research approach, in that sense that it was in close collaboration with the companies, with the operators, kind of visiting the places, getting insights into the work they're doing, the working conditions, living conditions of the animals, kind of learning from the operators about how they do things and why they do certain things, and in that way kind of collecting this type of knowledge that can help us to kind of to develop the criteria. And maybe Tiama, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, we can see here one of the projects that actually was focusing on the criteria, animals and responsible tourism. And I have to say that also the criteria that was developed for kind of, if we can call it criteria, because one of the things that we realized is that it was difficult to find a common agreement also on the things that can be included in the criteria and the things that we need to evaluate. And it was one of the things that we learned during this process, because when we started, we thought, okay, that there are disagreements, but that should be not many, because we thought, okay, operators are working with the same species, they have maybe some common ground, and that we can use for the development of the criteria. And now I will become more talking about the sled dogs criteria, but we soon realized that there were different point of view, different ways of doing things, and different ways of kind of looking into the welfare of the animals and how to secure them. And this make it very challenging to define what are the things actually you will prioritize when developing the criteria for the sled dogs. And unfortunately, also there was a criteria that was already developed in Canada, that is the March with Pride. And this is a criteria that was used by some of the companies operating in Lapland, so as a background in that sense, that they didn't have the label, but they were, but they follow it, the guidelines. And it was, I have to say, it's a well-developed criteria that was used in Canada. And unfortunately, because of the Vancouver Olympics, there was a situation with kind of unethical situation with the sled dogs during the Vancouver Olympics, when there was the culling of some sled dogs after the Olympics. They actually, which tainted the March with Pride, because some of the companies operators involved in this situation, they were actually they had the label, and it has a kind of a implication for the whole label in Canada. And but still, it was for us in Finland kind of a good ground for working on some criteria for Finland. And I have to say that it's kind of based on the criteria from Much with Pride. So we started learning from there what are the things they are actually emphasizing, but still for some operators it was very strict. And then we needed to kind of trying to see which are the parts that actually could be used, so in the Finnish context. We couldn't, in this project, after learning, and it was a 2-year project, so as I have said before, it was about going to the field, kind of doing some ethnographic research, doing interviews with the companies, with the operator, with travel, with tour operators, also talking to the tourists, kind of gathering a lot of information and knowledge, and combining this with the Much with Pride criteria. Then we came up with a kind of a guide for evaluating animal welfare in animal-based tourism in Finland. And the guideline we developed was just kind of questions. So like questions about what we should ask. What are the questions we need to ask, and we want to evaluate, assess the welfare of the sled dogs. So it was not a criteria or certification. It was just kind of questions that need to be asked, and we thought at that time. So it was actually, we came up with the guidelines at the end of 2018. And it was the idea that, okay, it will help to develop then finally certification. At that point in the project, the problem with developing kind of the final criteria and the certification is that because of the kind of the norms we have in different funding projects, or the funding agencies, the conditions that they put on the work we do, is that we were not actually allowed to create a certification. We were supposed to create a criteria or some guidelines, but not the final certification, because in that sense it would be an output, and the kind of we wouldn't be able to offer this service or sell the certification to any operator. So there was some kind of limitations that, okay, we had to stop at that point and finalize them with the kind of with the guidelines, and the idea that maybe an organization could then finally develop the whole certification. The problem also with the certification, because it was also, when thinking about this, was that we needed to find an organization that is neutral, that is able to monitor, audit, conduct the audits, and this is something that, and here we can see between this frame time that we have, 2016, 2019, when we were working on this, that kind of thinking about also how the certifications should be developed and implemented, and the need to have an organization behind that. It could not be the university, the place where we were working as researchers. It could not be also an association, because there was the idea that, okay, what is an association? For example, the Sled Dog Association will develop the certification and implement the criteria, but it's not neutral. So we needed to have a kind of a neutral organization that can actually do this type of work. But this was a time when the project ended. Kind of we had the guidelines ready, but we couldn't continue the work. It was a time when then we started thinking about, okay, what next? Because we did a lot of work on this, and we had the cooperation with the companies on the field, but we still kind of missing the final results, and was actually the criteria that could be audited. And it was 2016, 2019, and it was when we were thinking on this, on the next project, how to get funding for continuing finishing the work we started. Then, as you all know, so we had a pandemic that hit the tourism industry globally, but also Lapland, especially we think about also animals working in the industry. And it was a very difficult time for the operators, especially sled dog operators in Lapland, because, well, they had all the dogs there, no tourists. It was sort of like a difficult time for them to keep and maintain all the animals there within a period of 2 years. But it gave also the possibility to think about how to develop these kind of ethical practices or for the industry, and how to continue with the criteria. And that is the next slide. Tiama, please, if you can then go to the next one. And this actually what I kind of have the frame 2020, 2021, and it was a time when, so everything was standing still, a lot of challenges in the tourist industry in Lapland, especially in relation to sled dogs. But then at that point, then some operators approached us again and said, hey, maybe now is the time to continue this, to bring it to the end. And this is interesting because it's not, when we look at this process, it was not only the university, but it was also the operators kind of engaging with the university, with researchers, to try to develop this. From the first step, when actually they brought the topic into the university, they say, hey, do something about this. We started working on this. And then also again here in 2020, then some of the operators approach us and say, okay, we got onto this point. Can we try to bring it to the end? So like let's get the certification. But again, we had the problem, okay, the organization, which could be the organization. We started thinking, okay, maybe we don't need to create an organization. Maybe, okay, let's talk to already existing organization that maybe would like to include the criteria into their certification. And this was the kind of a very good idea in that sense, because everything also done for monitoring, auditing is already there, the whole framework. So let's bring the criteria into this. And we contacted Going Green, which is the organization coordinating two tourism certification for sustainability. And one is Green Key for hotels, and then Green Activities, that is for companies offering different type of activities, mostly outdoor activities. And then we talked to the organization and about this possibility, and they were very open. So about, okay, this is possible. We can do this because at that time there were some certification that include animal welfare issues, but very briefly, but nothing about sled dogs. In that sense, it was kind of new for Finland, not new for the world, because in Canada also much with prior was already kind of used years ago, but for Finland was a new thing. And then we started a process where also companies were invited to discuss the questions we have from the previous project. So like looking at the questions and then selecting what are the most important ones. And then once we select the questions, then we started with them to think about, okay, what are the answers? It was also not an easy process, because companies have different answers to this. Of course, the companies that were involved were the companies that are interested in improving the ethical, kind of making sled dog activities more ethical in that sense. And they helped to provide some answers. They actually started to kind of collecting the answers to the questions, and then again sending it for feedback about, okay, are these actually the things, the answers are right, or do you would accept them? So because the knowledge also here, even we have been working for many years on this, also the knowledge is out there with the operators, and there is a thing that also with the Green Key or Going Green, we wanted to have this also to confirm that these are the things we can have in the certification. At the same time, we had to say that there was also kind of two perspectives in that sense, that for some, the criteria was too how do you say, too light or easy. for some it was too demanding, and that was also the other thing we need to balance. Okay, how we balance so that everybody that was involved would agree and would be interested in joining the certification, because this is also a decision we had to make at the beginning, because if we would have the kind of the criteria too high, then it will, okay, some companies maybe will join, but then a lot of companies will stay out. And this was part of the decision also to have kind of a middle ground, though not to make it too demanding, so that we can have companies get involved into the certification, to the criteria, to start implementing it. And the idea with our certification is to, as they actually with time, so to increase the kind of the level, in that sense, to make it more demanding, but step by step. That was actually the approach, so that to try to get more companies into this kind of program. And actually, at the moment, I think if we think about Sled dogs, it should be something like 15 companies or 16 are certified by green activities. And it's a good so it's a good way, kind of I think a tool to show that, okay, some companies are kind of doing more than the law requires, because there is also a thing about certification. So like if we think about we have the legal framework, and all the sled dog operators should be operating according to that law. But the certification increase also that the level, that sense that they are doing more than the law is requiring. And that is something that maybe today there will be discussions on that, on the legal framework, because if we think about for animal welfare, it's kind of providing the minimum for securing the welfare of animals, but it's maybe not enough. So there's so like I wrote also a paper about with one colleague of mine from the University of Lapland about this kind of political corporate social responsibility. That this was something that was there. I think in that sense, if we think about this kind of political action to promote kind of social responsibility or ethics in the tourist industry. So it's something that we could see in this case because of the role of the companies. So like it was not actually researchers going there and say, hey, you have to do things better. But it was a company that they realized, okay, we can do things better, and there are ways to do that. And they put a lot of effort into pushing towards forward. So like to include university, to bring in university into the discussion, to promote the developing of, well, of these tools and the research that we have right now on animal issues in tourism. So in that sense, if we think about animals, companies as political actors, as in the case of the animal welfare or criteria for sled dogs, is a very good example of that, where companies were involved from the very beginning as drivers of this certification. And I think because of that also right now, so in the University of Lapland, we have research about animal welfare issues and animal work in tourism. And also now when I'm at the University of Oulu, also have to continue my research there on the topic as a result of the this kind of political action from the companies. I think I'm not sure if my time is coming to an end or I still.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
coming to an end.
Yes, I was assuming that, but I hope that I provide an overview, so like in that sense, telling kind of this story about what happened in this case and the different time frames and maybe the challenges we faced. I could tell more about kind of also the development of the criteria, but I hope that this overview helped to get an idea about the work we did during these years, and the work still continue kind of now when I also involved in green activities in the jury. So we are trying to improve down to say the criteria and helping to get new insights, because the idea also would be that the criteria should they kind of will be more demanding in the future. So it's not that they stay the same all the time. And we actually green activities also getting feedback from the field about how the certification is working right now. So in that sense, it's a learning process. The learning process is still ongoing, not has not end. But I'm happy to stay here with you. So during this presentation today, and if there are questions later, so I'm happy to answer them. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, JC. That was excellent. And we'll come back to you with questions and reflections and maybe hear a little bit more in the panel discussion part of today's session. So we'll now go into the Project PAWWS that I mentioned is hosting today. And as I said already, we're divided into these 3 work packages across the participating universities, which is Aalto University, the University of Helsinki, and then the University of Lapland. And so first up, we have the work package by Astrid Huopalainen and Ida Hietala. And they're presenting today on multi-species equality and inclusion at work. And Astrid works as an assistant professor at Aalto University in the Department of Management and Organization. And her expertise is in post-humanist perspectives, human-animal relations, more than human organizing, as well as gender and diversity-related inequalities in organizations. And Astrid is also our consortium PI, and she leads the Aalto University's part of PAWWS. And then we have Ida, who is a PhD candidate and soon to be postdoc in PAWWS. And she explores topics such as creative production, consumer research, and multi-species experiencing and imaginative organizing. So Astrid and Ida, the space is now yours.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and really nice to meet all of you. And while we have Ida setting up the slides here, I'll start by briefly sort of presenting the work that we do in work package 2 of the project. And I think the title of our package really sort of nails it. So these are the issues that we are working with. So a very key concern for us in this work package is the question of how do we create more ethical and species inclusive societies, organizations, and business practices where individuals of all species can thrive. So not just human animals in that sense. And what we do ultimately is really to explore these dynamics of inclusion and exclusion and how they happen in everyday practices. And we're also interested in the lived experiences of inclusion and exclusion. So how do people perceive that? And how can we also understand that from the non-human, from the animal perspective? So here we think about an interspecies angle that really builds on shared embodiment between humans and other animals, and also looking into issues such as spatial dynamics. How do that play into inclusion, exclusion? How do gender issues play into that? How do different intersectionalities play out when we think about gender intersecting, for instance, with disabilities, age, ethnicity, and so forth. So can I get the next slide, please? And as the starting points for this VP, we of course know from literature on diversity, equity, and inclusion that these issues are very complex. Yet we also know that the literature has tended to be very anthropocentric, so basically focusing on humans and kind of bringing in the voices of marginalized humans into organizations. But we also know, of course, that animals are often in an even more marginal position than the most vulnerable and marginal humans. Hence, this is something that we look at, and this is something we need to consider. So we urgently need to imagine more inclusive societies for the animals, where we can imagine better worlds for them. And this really involves active work in order to change organizations and change work practices as such. So what we seek to do is also to trouble these dominant power dynamics and to trouble this dominant anthropocentrism of the whole literature and the DEI practices as such. And as we know in this world today, we're also facing this pushback for DEI issues. And I would say that our work package really seeks to more radically push for species inclusive DIA. So really changing dominant knowledges and also think about what it means to reflexively create species inclusive practices, while also understanding that there are methodological and other issues involved in doing so. So we look at these dynamics of how inclusion and exclusion happen in practice, and we consider these uneven power relations, and we also look at intersectionality. And the way we understand this notion of multi-species inclusivity is really that we want to bring in, it's a perspective where the voices, the agencies, the perspectives and interests of animals are brought from the margins to the very center and to the very fore of organizations as well. Good. Then we can look into the next slide and also some of the theoretical starting points or the notions that we work with in practice. So as said, this notion of multi-species inclusivity is, of course, important for us. And we know from literature also that inclusive organizations really kind of value individuals from diverse backgrounds, and they also seek to involve them in decision-making. But the problem with animals is, of course, the question of consent. So how can they consent to the inclusion? How can the inclusion be ethical? And this is something that we also seek to think about carefully. We also know that in DEI literature, there's a risk of double marginalization when people with disabilities, for instance, go to work with service animals or assistant animals and so forth. So this is something that needs to be considered. So how do we build on that? And how do we seek to address this marginalization that takes place? So we also build on the work of Aline Yammers, for instance, in this sense, and also extend the conversation by more firmly bringing in animal voices, perspectives, and agencies to the debates. Next slide, please.
Okay, hey, I'm Ida Hietala. I'm the PhD researcher, and a little bit about the data collection. So far, we have collected data from around 40 participants, assistant dog handlers, therapy dog professionals, trainers, association members, and co-workers. And we've been using in-depth interviews, observations, photos, videos, field notes, and logbooks. And we've been focusing on how bodies move and how emotions and effects circulate and how space and language are creating either inclusion or exclusion, both for humans and for animals. And here, I can't, and one more. That's it, thank you so much. So yeah, this first one is from an assistant dog handler, quote, and it shows how this spatialized everyday inequality is experienced together by the human and the dog. So I'm reading a little bit of this, but not too much. So the dog is always in the corner of my eye. There has to be a dog. It feels really strange when she's not there. Every time I move, I perceive space in a way that includes me and the dog. We take quite a bit of space, and I choose routes based on that. That's why in some situations I feel really anxious, like in queues when it's narrow and crowded, and I have to manage both my own space and the dog space. So here the dog is formally included in public space, but in practice you can see that the built environment doesn't support their movements or well-being, and not the humans either. So their needs are overlooked together. And inclusion becomes pretty much conditional on environments that were never designed for them as a pair. The next slide, please. And this quote, this snippet from another assistant dog handler is showing a different form of inequality. So here the dog is recognized, but only in functional terms. So it goes like this. I wouldn't necessarily separate how this dog has affected my life. I think I should consider how the assistant dog in general has changed my life. Each dog has had their own personality, sure, but in the end, there haven't been such big differences between them. A dog is a dog. The color changes, and you then adjust your clothing to match a little. So we see here very clearly this anthropocentric frame, and the dog is valued as a reliable support, but it's also a piece of equipment, something that is quite standardized and interchangeable. And I would say that the subjectivity of the dog disappears in this a little bit. Inclusion happens, but it is shaped by this human-centered idea of usefulness. Next slide, please. Thank you. And here's the last example. So this is from an occupational therapist. And I noticed that we're a bit of our time is running out soon. So I'm not going to read all of this, but it is an example of intentional, respectful inclusion. And it's not perfect, but it's a good example anyway. And for instance, she says that we always agree on things with the patients in advance. So for example, if the dog is on their bed, then no one is allowed to go touch them there. And also no toys are taken and no running around with them. And the dog's equipment is only used as agreed. So this really shows a thoughtful effort to include the dog as a working subject with preferences and boundaries. And there is this active planning and care and communication. And hopefully, it's an attempt to build a setting where the dog could maybe feel safe and respected and confident in their own working role. So the last slide, please. And to finish, here are 4 takeaways from our early findings that are related to inclusion and exclusion. So visibility, we must recognize these often hidden work lives of animals and how vulnerable the animals might be in those positions. Everyday dynamics, so inclusion and exclusion happens through how we move, how we feel, and how we speak or stay silent. Intersectionality, so DEI can't focus only on gender or race, even if those are so important, but including animals helps us to think more deeply about fairness and solidarity. So in these unfortunately very uncertain times, we need shared hope and action for justice across all species. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ida and Astrid. And we can take questions, as I said, later in the panel discussion. So if you have any questions, do type them into the chat already, or then open your mic during the panel discussion. But second, we have a team, the PAWWS team from the University of Helsinki, and they have a presentation called Humane Partnership, Taking the Lead. And we have adjunct professor, senior clinical teacher and veterinarian, Anna Hjelm-Björkman, who's a multidisciplinary researcher, and she's been the PI of a dozen clinical projects at the Department of Equine and Small Animal Medicine at the Faculty of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Helsinki. So in addition to leading the University of Helsinki's part of PAWWS, she also leads a dog risk research group and is an expert in chronic pain, adjunct therapies, dog health and nutrition, and scent detection dog topics. And then we have Nona Borgström, who is a project planner in dog risk, and she's a researcher on pain dogs at the University of Helsinki. And Nona's expertise is in social rehabilitation, dog ethology, animal-assisted therapies, scent detection training, animal-assisted pediatric and elderly care, and neuropsychiatric animal handling. So Anna and Nona, the space is now yours.
Thank you for the nice introduction. And we are sitting here in the same room with Nona. And so we're going to have this together. So we're going to talk about actually work package number 3 in the PAWWS. And it is about this new canine scent detection profession, these pain dogs, and about what we're looking into their welfare and well-being, and using them as kind of an example of this. So let's see if we can change. No, we can't change either. Let's see. I have to probably go out from this and put it back again. Let's see if we can. Yeah. So we are going to present the followings, and I will just start with saying that we're not going to talk about the sledge dogs, but we are more focusing on the medical detection dogs and the medical alert dogs. And one of the first ones that we were working with is cancer dogs, and then also the COVID detection dogs that were out at the airport after or during the COVID. And we also work together with people who have been training both assistant dogs and police dogs, whereof just as Linda said, Nona is one of the trainers of the assistant dogs.
Yeah, and then we have the One Health in focus, and we are presenting the trained medical pain alert dogs. We call them here TMPAD. And they offer multiple benefits within the clinical and social care setting. But also, in addition to the benefits from the human health, as we have talked here earlier, the well-being of the medical alert dogs themselves are in focus, and also the dialogue and the kind of the human-animal bond and getting them better. And also you can see here in the picture, it is from Aalto Orthopedic Hospital, a dog pushing a button and therefore alerting an upcoming pain episode. And the question here is that what are the positive or negative health-related outcomes for the human, patients, and or the dog when they work together? And we have listed here 3 objectives. One is to recognize how the use of the medical alert dog helps the patient to notice upcoming pain. Also to investigate a really new method in the world, a chronic pain rehabilitation, where kind of a therapy dog or animal-assisted intervention method, where the dog has an ability to alarm paroxysmal pain, and as we refer to severe or fluctuating pain. And also to study the working environments and welfare issues of the dog and the kind of like the biomarkers, stress as one.
And we had certain hypotheses that we were working with, and we've been able to get some results on some of them already. So our first hypothesis was that the use of medical alert dogs in an animal-assisted rehabilitation setting will actually help the patient to notice the upcoming pain. Our second hypothesis was that these pain assistant dogs increases the patient's quality of life and well-being, and which can mean, for example, that the patient can partly go back to work or is more social and can go and see people again, go outside, go to the shop by himself, and things like that. Very kind of easy things, but for these patients, very, very big things. And the third hypothesis that we worked with was that we think we can introduce new methods to measure this welfare and support the well-being of these animal pain alert dogs in this way. The methods that we've been using are both qualitative and quantitative. So we've been using semi-structured interviews and also questionnaires with validated questionnaires that are usually used for patients with quality of life issues or pain issues. And they are, for example, the RAND, and then different type of numeric pain scales and functional scales, which can say that when I started, I had a pain of 10, and now I have a pain of 6. So these are really good that we can actually get some kind of quantitative data as well. And all of these we have used like before they got their pain as an alarming dog, and then also at different time intervals, and then like follow up after a year and 2 years.
And the integration of non-human co-workers, such as these medical alert dogs, into social and healthcare settings, we think that they involve critical considerations and well-planned implementation. We recommend that the healthcare system can integrate non-human co-workers when working conditions are addressed correctly, as they enhance the quality of care and foster a more collaborative environment. And here are some of our summaries. So we are partly focusing as we talk about the animal welfare in the One Health part. And here we have had interviews where all the patients has emphasized the importance of the dog's well-being. And I have some examples from our data. So it's like a person with an assistant dog that has said that they have gotten a deeper connection with the dog as it started alerting the pain as well, when the dog, he or she, started to alert pain. And another one is that the patients could not think of a life without a dog after this. Big help that the dog has been offering. And they have said that the dog is not just a dog, it's a family member. About the dog's abilities, do you think, Anna, we can give it a shot if we can get it to work? We have a short video, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. But here you can see the dog is looking at the patient, then going to the alarm button when kind of like the pain is starting to rise. And then you can hear the alarm sound. And this is like the dog's act is like a continuous sensor where the dog is really keen on getting this homeostasis and getting the pain down. So it's working together with the physiotherapist and the patient. And this multi-species interprofessional work, you can see that the kind of like the clinical dog and the physiotherapist offer a really unique service. So you can see that you have had animal-assisted therapy before, but this is really a novel thing that the therapy dog can also alert the upcoming pain. And obviously also we are keen on looking at how they are interacting with each other. So it will be a nice matter and nice atmosphere.
And of course, when we are doing work like this, we think that, of course, the most important is that we are able to get the information from the research out into the society and give some societal impact. So we want our stakeholders to be able to use this. And I think that Nona is doing a great job at the moment on getting these things down. So why don't you talk about those ones that you have there on the list.
Yeah, thank you. So we wanted to mention a few things we have been working with. One is the scent detection standard that we just started working with. It's a really multi-professional group, and it's going to be a national standard. Then we are involved in the parliament group, where Sofia Virta is the chairman. Then we also have really deep and good connection with Orton Orthopedic Hospital, where all our pain dogs are also involved and working with. So it's really not, it's more than a multi-professional. I could say it's an interprofessional kind of work. And then Anna already mentioned the research about the cancer dogs for the time being in Japan.
Yeah.
And then the COVID dogs that we had at the airport as well. And thank you for my part for listening.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Nona and Anna. We have some questions in the chat, but we'll come back to them during the panel discussion. So there was a question for you. So we have the last work package now with Dr. Tiamat Varda, who's actually organized today's symposium. And she's from the Multidimensional Tourism Institute at the Faculty of Social Sciences here at the University of Lapland. And Tiamat is a postdoctoral researcher and anthrozoologist, and she's worked over a decade as a guide dog instructor, dog behavior and research consultant. And she's now working to create different roadmaps towards sustainable, regulated work for humans and dogs within the discipline of animal organizational studies. And as I mentioned earlier, my name is Linda Tallberg, and I'm a senior lecturer also here at the University of Lapland's Multidimensional Tourism Institute. And I'm part of this last work package as well with Tiamat, and I lead the University of Lapland's part of PAWWS. My own expertise lies at the intersection of animal and business ethics, human-animal work, post-humanism, and animal organizational studies. So the title of this final PAWWS work package talk is Sled Dogs as Tourism Workers. So Tiamat, the space is now yours.
Thank you so much, Linda. And if you all can't see my screen, just unmute and shout, and I'll fix that, but hopefully that's working okay. As Linda mentioned, we make up the work package 1 of Project PAWWS, and it's been so great, even though I know the work that everyone's doing in our project, to kind of just hear about it again today. And I'm so happy that so many of you are able to join us, so thank you. Yeah, today I'm just really briefly providing an overview of the current research that we have at the moment that's in the later stages, so is being written up into articles. And as Linda said, the title of today's talk is Sled Dogs as Tourism Workers, because that has been our focus of our field work from last year. But this isn't the only topic that we're concerned with. So the academic discipline of animal organization studies, which Linda briefly mentioned, is our sort of sphere of inquiry, so to speak. Animal organization studies brings individuals of other species into the center of business and organizational analysis, but through a more critical lens. And so our research really highlights ethical, more structural, but perhaps most importantly, interpersonal dynamics within interspecies work. So this is only a very short talk today, but if you do want to learn more about this discipline and what kind of work has been done in it, you can take a look at this edited volume that I've put here, maybe take a screenshot, or we can share it in the chat later. This was edited by Linda and Lindsay Hamilton. So our work package is concerned with animal organization studies, not only as it relates to sled dog work, is what I'm trying to say here, but also to working dogs more broadly. And some of these topics do carry over to other multi-species workplaces. If you're interested in how we collected this data, this is a very quick summary. This field work was part of what is referred to as a multi-species ethnography, which means it's very qualitative. I carried out field work for around 6 months in Finnish Lapland, where I collected this data alongside writing field notes and observing and engaging with sled dogs and guides and mushers and sled dog adopters. And there were, of course, contributions and data collection, of course, from Linda as well as part of this package, as well as other collaborators, especially to mitigate language barriers, because I'm in the very early stages of learning Finnish. But yes, and I'll also talk more about this 360-degree video concept at a later point. So the first article is one which is conceptual, but it provides a lot of empirical data as well. Currently, there are kennels who are working really hard to improve the sled dog industry, which I think definitely came across in JC's talk earlier. And then there are others who are making, at least in Finland, making news headlines due to their abuse of sled dogs and guides, so tourism guides. This is touched on during the short film as well that we'll show after this presentation. And the owner of and staff at Bear Hill Husky do speak in the film a bit about their own efforts towards providing improvements in the sled dog welfare and business practices in the sled dog industry as a move away from some more traditional anthropocentric kennel cultures that see sled dogs truly as tools for only economic gain and not as sentient beings. And so from the data, we have identified extreme cultural differences in how mushers and guides perceive and act on concepts of decent, humane, and sustainable work. And so this concept of humane work will definitely be talked about in depth later on during Kendra Coulter's keynote, so I will let the professional talk about that topic. But we have identified that one central factor for differences around this topic is what we are referring to as cultures of practice. And so we found these two central cultures of practice that are currently sort of perhaps dominating the sled dog industry. And without unpacking this at length today, this article is essentially presenting that which culture a musher or guide find themselves in within a given time can either hinder or fundamentally enable their motivation and ability at times to support these changes in the sled dog industry, toward more decent, humane, and sustainable work practices. And this can, of course, change over time as much of life does. We explored the impact that cultures of practice can have on work practices related to sled dog health, housing, their social lives, but also their work dynamics with guides and the role as well that tourism operators have in shaping work practices that ultimately guide the well-being of sled dogs and guides, or rather impact it to varying extents. And again, this is applicable to other multi-species workplaces. So I won't talk too much about this today because we do have this short film screening in just a moment that will share much more information about this topic in more depth. But another area we are focusing on is the rehoming of sled dogs. And so based on the extensive data we've collected on this, we discuss in this article, what kennels might be able to incorporate into their practices to establish or perhaps also just improve existing rehoming processes based on the experiences of sled dog adopters and kennels who already do rehome. And so our data stems from sled dog adopters who have kept their sled dogs in Finland, but also have taken them to the UK and to Europe and even as far as the US. So there's an image here of a dog who completed the Appalachian Trail with her human. And these are cases with all different ages and health conditions and so on. So quite a diverse group of wonderful individuals. But there are a lot of challenges as well that these adopters have faced with these sled dogs, often who are not prepared for adoption or living in a home and outside of a kennel. And this is especially the case from kennels where sled dogs were not socialized even by sled dog tourism standards or even the law, as JC mentioned earlier. But we did gain a lot of useful insight regarding what the different approaches are of kennels, so whether they keep the dogs, rehome them, or otherwise, as well as what adopters consistently experienced across the board, despite the wide range of backgrounds and interesting locations that these sled dogs travel to. So this is a ChatGPT created this, which is absolutely ridiculous. And the sled dog in the back is kind of coming through the fence and looking at us strangely, but I was just procrastinating while making these slides, but it does kind of align with these this topic in kind of a really stretched way in terms of trying out new things. This is a methods article that is not limited to research with sled dogs, but is concerned with multi-species ethnographic research more broadly. But sled dogs are a fieldwork example. We're interested in how researchers can adopt new and developing tools and methods to conduct research that collects as much data of as many of the multi-species actors present as possible. And so to do this, we tested the role of a 360-degree camera in ethnographic research by mounting it on a body harness and having this worn by either the researcher, so either by Linda or myself, or by interlocutors, human interlocutors. So we both went around Finnish Lapland asking human interlocutors if they would mind all too much to wear a harness with a 360-degree camera mounted on the front for the sake of research, which is had also many people agreeing to that, which was really wonderful. Here you can see some actual photos from our fieldwork and not a strange ChatGPT image. The image on the left is of the camera mounted on a kennel wall to document the weighing of puppies at a sled dog kennel, so it can be stationary. And the one on the far right is my view of an interlocutor wearing the mounted camera, and the middle image is that same camera, but it's perspective if you pan it upwards towards the dog and human snuggling, sort of changing your perspective of what you're seeing, and you can also pan it around to see everything around them. And so as its name suggests, 360-degree cameras record everything within a 360-degree radius, both vertically and horizontally. And so essentially you can see everything around you. And what distinguishes these cameras from other visual methods is that the footage really is frameless. And so both the researcher and interlocutor are moved in front of the camera, as are all the other individuals present. And so in other words, regardless if human or an individual of another species, everything and everyone in the camera's field is considered equally relevant, and the researcher can return to this video footage at a later point as a way of returning to the field. And they can pan the video in all directions and discover new elements that went previously unnoticed, perhaps. So in other words, it's not down to or limited by the researcher to select who or what they find important to document in that moment. And so this, I think, offers a powerful new lens for ethnographic inquiry in that way. But I've absolutely tried to whiz through this. Let me see if I can click to the next one. That's all from our work package. I hope that this brief presentation of the 3 main articles we're working on has given you a good taste of the work that we've been doing. You can definitely email us if you have questions or want to discuss something, and you can definitely look, of course, at the PAWWS website for more information. We now have at 4:15 Finland time, so in 5 minutes, we have a video screening from Bear Hill Husky and filmed by Markus Brandl. So I would suggest, because we have 5 minutes, perhaps we can take a little stretch break and, getting coffee or water break, depending where you are. And then we'll return in 5 minutes and I'll have the video ready to go. But yeah, thank you for listening. Great, thank you. I'm just going to get it started. There might be some people in the audience from Bear Hill who might be able to answer some questions later. But essentially, I'm very happy to share this film today. I'm very happy that Markus Brandl and everyone at Bear Hill was happy to have it shown today. This is a short film talking about the work that Bear Hill Husky does, but also gives you insight into rehoming. It gives you insight to the sled dogs themselves and the different breeds there are working in Finnish Lapland, and also touches a bit again on that theme that I touched on briefly in my talk. So without further ado, I hope the sound is okay. I did share the sound, so let's hope that works. I will press play, and I hope you enjoy this film.
Well, one of the things that we very often run into is the fact that people don't actually know what an Alaskan Husky is. In their mind's eye, you have 2 Arctic sled dogs, an Alaskan Malamute and a Siberian Husky. And the Siberian Husky is the only Husky out there. Now the thing is, there is another breed, the Alaskan Husky. This is a very amorphous dog. You cannot pin a shape on it. You cannot pin a color on it. You can pin attributes on it. its character, its drive, its work ethic. If you go into a general yard of Alaskan Huskies, they do not look like what people think a traditional Husky should look like. They can be widely different types of dogs, but they all share one thing. They like to run fast, pull hard, and they're pretty tough and have a lot of endurance.
I think that Alaskan Huskies especially, they are very open to people, to new people, and they love to be around people. It's in their breed.
Over here we are looking at our Wall of Fame, where we are putting up the name signs of the dogs that we have rehomed from our kennel. The dogs that were rehomed for different purposes. So some of them were retired by age, and some of them were just not a good fit for tourism business. I have adopted 5 dogs from here. 4 of them were actually quite young when they moved in with me, and only 1 of them was rehomed age-wise.
I live in Rovaniemi and I live in an apartment. We have 54 square meters and a little balcony. Soon it's going to be 2 dogs living there. And I think there is a little bit of this misconception that Huskies cannot live in an apartment. They need a house with a big garden to run in. But I think that the garden would only make it more convenient for me as the human. I mean, I'm no dog trainer, to be fair, so this is just like me talking from what I think. But I think that if a dog always goes into the same environment, you know, after a while, it could also get boring. So if they only go into the backyard, but get no other kind of stimulation in other environments, then also the backyard isn't helping much.
I've seen retired sled dogs live in apartment blocks. I've seen people have dogs in Italy, on the Mediterranean islands, and they take their dog for a walk in the evening, and then they go up into the mountains when it's nice and cool, and during the day the dog just sleeps next to the air conditioner. Is still a happy dog. So Huskies can actually adapt to quite many different places. They can adapt to quite many different circumstances, but what they all generally need is someone who cares about them, does things with them, and if possible, has 1 or 2 other dogs to do many things with, because a Husky is always happier if it has someone to do things with.
I have the feeling that rehomed dogs, whoever I saw rehomed from a kennel that was suddenly in a smaller family or a smaller pack, they just bloom. They explore being a spoiled dog and they just enjoy it so much and they look happy.
Most of the dogs that I have rehomed to people, I try to give them to people who I trust will do things with them. Just having a dog to have is not enough.
I do think there's differences in the kennel on how the dogs are treated and how big the bond is between the dogs and the people. I have worked in other kennels before, and I have experienced there are kennels which see the dogs only as work tools. Well, the dogs bring the money in for their own good, but also, of course, for the company owners. But I do have the feeling, and that's why I stayed at Bear Hill for so long already, that it's different and the standards are higher.
I can see that all the people involved here really love the dogs that they work with, and that they want to, even if they cannot work anymore, that they want to give them a good life. And I think that is a really nice thing if you compare it with other kennels who may not have the same values.
We want to be a force of good in the sled dog world. Bear Hill wants to change this business, this branch, this sector, this activity for the better. I can slowly try to promote good business practices, good animal welfare, through the interactions I have with my colleagues, the interactions I have with the general public or our guests. And there is kennels out there that I'm really happy to say I'm learning from. But it is nice to see younger kennels come in and bring a fresh wind, showing things and bringing an energy which is really nice as well. To see that they're very focused on the welfare of their dogs. They're doing it out of passion in their lifestyle, and they really want to do a good job. And that is very nice to see. We want to provide a place where people like that can come with their dogs and have a nice place to work.
The people who are working at Bear Hill Husky are hired not only with a good background of training or how they know themselves around dogs, but also about their passion. We want to know our dogs. We want to know every individual, and we want to see how they develop from a puppy when we take them out to weigh them every day until their first time on the sled. We want to see how they are thriving, how they are developing. We bring them in so small steps towards being a great sled dog, and then to see them in the end, to see the result of their development, of their personal growth, is just very fulfilling. And I think that the people who are working at Bear Hill see this. And this is a goal that we have. We have this special bond with our dogs. We know them. We know what they like. We know how they eat. We know, are they fast eaters or slow eaters? Do they like their food with water or without? There's so many different qualities of a dog that can be brought into a team. We create experiences with them so that we can learn to trust them and that they can learn to trust us. And I think that's the difference. The dogs are not just tools. They are family, they are crew members, they are all loved individuals. And according to this, we are rehoming the dogs. And if we don't find a beneficial home for them that's better than what we give to them at the kennel, then we don't give the dogs away. We don't rehome to get rid of the dogs. We want the dogs to have a better life after what they have already.
The main part is making sure that we're still doing right by the dog, that we're doing our very best to make sure that every one of our dogs or someone else's dogs, if someone else trusts us, this organization, to take care of their dog and put it somewhere, that they can give us that dog and to rehome, knowing that we're doing the very best we can for that dog. Because again, having a dog end up somewhere where it is unhappy is the worst possible result. We want to have dogs finding the best possible people for them. If I can do this for my dogs, I hope I can do it for other people's dogs. That is something that I'm trying to work to.
Great, thank you. Such a wonderful film. I think the storytelling is really wonderful. Betty and Valentine speak so well about the sled dog industry and the work that they do. And I'm really happy that they were generous with this film, that we could show it today, and of course to the filmmaker Marcos Banto. Yeah, so if you have any questions you'd like to ask, I think I'll just call back everyone who kind of virtually create a little discussion here about the talks we've had so far.
Morning.
All right. Hello, Kendra.
Hello. Not morning for you.
We're going to get started, so if everyone can start coming back slowly. I hope you're able to get something nice to drink to listen to this wonderful keynote. Yeah, we're going to now have our keynote with Dr. Kendra Coulter, who is a full professor in management and organizational studies and leads the world's first major in animal ethics and sustainability leadership at Huron? I always say Huron University College, Western University in Canada. Kendra is also a fellow of the Oxford Center for Animal Ethics and has authored seminal articles and books on the topic of interspecies work and is very notable in her development of the concept of humane jobs and work lives, which she will be speaking about today. I think anyone interested in the topic of interspecies work, so the work of humans and other animals together, will be very familiar with her work, or if not, I think you'll find it extremely interesting, whether you're an academic or a practitioner or someone who's just interested in this topic. And we had so many questions just now in the Q&A that really bumped up against what Kendra will be speaking about today. So I think this will be especially interesting for this audience, I hope. And I'm already looking forward to the questions and discussions that follow. So, but yeah, enough from me. You've come here to hear from Kendra, so I will just welcome you, Kendra, very warmly to this event. Thank you so much for being here. I have shared your slides, so I don't know, I think I need to give you the remote control for that, or I can just, oops, now I've taken it away. Or I can just change it manually for you.
I'm happy to just say next slide, just to keep the technology as easy as possible, if that works.
Sure. Yeah, so welcome, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much to Tiamat and the whole team at PAWWS. It's wonderful to see you all. I would have really loved to be part of the other discussions, but I'm actually saying good morning to you because it is morning here. I know you're wrapping up your day, and I'm grateful that you are still engaged and are still keen to hear a few ideas from me, which I'm absolutely delighted to share. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, it's morning here, and I'm actually also speaking to you from Canada, which is simultaneously traditional treaty and unceded territories of at least 3 Indigenous nations, the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenape. So we acknowledge and recognize that colonial history, but more than just doing a land acknowledgement of this kind, I want to note that Indigenous nations and peoples are heterogeneous and diverse, and that I, as part of this work, am continually seeking to learn about and from their linked and distinct ways of understanding animals' work and multi-species relations. So that context is important for locating me in space and time. And so are these books. What I'd like to do today is synthesize a constellation of about a decade, a little over a decade of scholarly writing, as well as accessible and media work. That includes these 3 books: Animals' Work and the Promise of Interspecies Solidarity, which was the first text to really propose a comprehensive vision for thinking about the work done with, by, and for animals, and introduce the concept of humane jobs. More recently, an edited collection with Charlotte Blattner and Will Kimlick, a multidisciplinary collection on animal labor. And then my most recent book bridges academic and frontline audiences. So this is the kind of book you could give as a Christmas gift, because it's informed by theory and analysis, but written in an accessible and an inviting way that really is fueled by solidarity, and focusing in particular on the work of animal protection in all its diversity in the animal protection landscape. And yes, I have to boast a little bit. That is a quote from Dr. Jane, the woman who's done more for animals than anybody else on the planet, on the front of that. She sent that endorsement quote from the Amazon, the rainforest, not the big conglomerate. She was 89 years old in the Amazon rainforest, still working for endangered species, truly inspiring. But so is the work of many people featured in that book, and the work that you are inspiring to do. We can each make a really positive difference for other animals and other people. And I'd like to share some ideas that might invite you and encourage you with tools and food for thought to help you think about ways to strengthen the work that you're doing. Do the next slide. I fundamentally believe that work is a really powerful concept, and that it can be illuminating in terms of shining lights on individuals and groups and actors and actions, but also mobilizing in terms of inspiring and igniting movement for so much of social life, that it is a really powerful nexus and lens and tool that links so much of what we're thinking about, and is a really fruitful avenue. But so is the concept of solidarity, and I think that they must work together. The next slide, please. I also think this might seem simple, but I actually think sometimes it's really helpful to just pause and say, when we talk about animals, who do we mean? And of course I say who, not it or that. Animals is an umbrella group. And the concept of work can actually help us, in my view, understand most of these animals, with the exception of one or two groups in particular. So it's helpful to talk about domesticated and wild, just to recognize that the animals are grouped by us into those two categories. Then that domesticated animals may be companion animals or farmed animals, and they have very, very different lives. Among wild animals, we are of course holding some captive, where most members of a wild species would be in the wild, but a few, whether it's 100 or 1,000, might be held in captivity. I think on occasion they are put to work. Sometimes they're simply put on display. But then there are, of course, animals in labs who are a really complicated category, who don't quite fit in either the domesticated or the wild. And in general, I would argue that most of them are not working. On occasion, they might be asked to do a task in exchange for a reward in a research setting, but more often they're being worked on as test subjects and so forth. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about both domesticated and wild animals today. I think it's helpful to start to frame and organize the kind of work that that animals do. And this was really articulated in Animals' work and the promise of interspecies solidarity. And I thought I brought anthropology into this, I brought feminist political economy into this, that there's certain assumptions that we make when we say the word work, and that in fact we need a broader understanding of what work means and involves. So I start with the recognition that wild animals engage in subsistence work, the work done literally to subsist or survive. That animals, particularly in domesticated contexts, may engage in certain kinds of voluntary work. It's not formal, it's not assigned, but they may be choosing to do it. And then the largest and most complicated category is the work that we explicitly assign to animals. And so that is the work mandated by humans. I think it's helpful to unpack work in this way as a starting place. And in the next slide, I'll elaborate a little bit more about what I mean by this. Wild animals work. They engage in literal subsistence work, finding food and water and avoiding predators. It's the kind of work that is the least affected by us. However, they have to navigate human-created hazards, whether that be roads or buildings or windows, infrastructure. Human-caused climate change is fundamentally changing environments where water used to be located. It is no longer located. That is work. It's a huge part of wild animals' existence. It also includes care work that they have to, most species, unless you're a reptile and you lay your egg and you move on, you have to engage in some care work to raise your young and ensure the reproduction of your species. So you should teach them how to act and how to find food themselves and how to avoid predators and how to interact with more dominant members of the group and how to be differential and how to communicate and how to understand social cues and probably how to understand some of the ways other animals communicate in your area, because animals are communicating across species in wild contexts, listening. Oh, that's the warning from the blue jays for hawk, and all the other kinds of the birds hearing. They learn that call. So the young are being taught that. Simultaneously, I argue that wild animals' subsistence work and care work contributes to the reproduction of ecosystems. And so I introduced this concept of eco-social reproduction. So some of you may think about the idea of social reproduction, which is, you can just think about people to make it even easier. All the work we do to reproduce people, we feed and clothe and tend to and educate, and it's physical and it's emotional and it's educational, it's all of those things, and we reproduce people, reproduce future generations. Animals do the same. They reproduce their future generations through all of their work. They don't do laundry, but they do the animal equivalent. At the same time, their work reproduces ecosystems. They're spreading seeds, they're clearing pathways, they work in symbiosis. Animals like elephants, for example, tortoises, are called keystone species, and the work that they're doing on a day-to-day basis to survive is helping to facilitate the conditions for other animals to live and excel. And of course, the social reproductive work and eco-social reproductive work that pollinators like bees do, we all depend on it for survival, right? Because as they do their pollinating work for their own communities to create their honey, which is what they use to feed their selves over winter, they're pollinating between 1/3 and 1/2 of our food crops. So we're all interconnected. So I think it's important to recognize this. And I actually am finding this an increasingly interesting area, which is how does the eco-social reproductive work of animals benefit other animals? So I'm finding that really interesting. We can do the next slide. Very briefly, if any of you have, I suspect some of you have, animals in your homes and families, and they may have different personalities. When you're sad or when you're sick or when your kids are or other kids are, they may seek to comfort you. They are doing informal care work. Now you may have others who are like, I'm watching the birds out the window. I don't actually care about you. This is something that they choose to do for us. Now we know scientifically that dogs in particular engage in emotional contagion, is what the ethologists call, which is that when we're sad, their stress hormones increase. I think it's very interesting just informally to observe this. I was comforting someone the other day who had lost her dog the night before, and my dog was with me, and she went over when the woman got extra emotional about it. She understood that is a heightened emotional response. I feel it. I'm going to try to bring comfort. So animals may choose to engage in that kind of informal care work to comfort us. And also, you know, when they bark at the door, they believe they're protecting their family and their group. And it's particularly important in the context of unhoused people, women who are trying to survive on the streets or when they're precariously housed. The work that those dogs do on a day-to-day basis can be literally life-saving in terms of their survival. So I want to acknowledge this. This is something that animals may choose to do. It's not a formal job, but we can recognize that they're volunteering. They're giving themselves to provide care or protection work for those that they care about. And then there's the work mandated by us. I know that's the big focus of what you're thinking about. And it certainly includes the good, the bad, the ugly, and the more complicated. And so analysis of this includes formal jobs or occupations, right? That is a detection dog, that is a police horse. We tend to give names, we make it formal. There might be a uniform associated or some kind of item that's indicating to the animal that this is what they're now in work mode because they have this particular harness on, things like that. So we can look at specific jobs and occupations. And then within that, we can look at specific labor processes, labor process theories that are used for that job. I'll explain that in a second. So we'll do the next slide. So labor process theories that we use to study people, so anthropocentric concepts, can help us understand the work that animals are doing. So for example, if you're a service dog, that's your job, you may engage in these labor processes. So for example, you might be engaged in interspecies communication work, where you are reading and receiving and understanding a shared language across species. Body work is an interesting concept, really developed by Carol Wolkowitz and folks in England. For people, it usually refers to the work done to the bodies of others. We can still use that in looking at animals, but we can also look at the ways that animals' bodies themselves become tools. And animals are engaging their minds at all time. This is why we can't just think of manual labor. So much of what animals are doing now, especially in the global north, involves their minds and their emotions. So you can see there's interconnection between these. If you're going to be communicating, you're understanding emotions. And this is where I really want to draw attention to Tiamat's work. She's done really excellent, nuanced, thoughtful, rigorous development. She's done more than anybody to really develop how we think about the emotional work that animals do and engage in, and people do with them. So I would definitely encourage everyone to be reading her work. She has a new book coming out. You're going to want to get that or order it for your library or both to really think about these concepts. That essentially, these can be tools in our toolkits that we mobilize and say, is this working? Is this what's going on? Is that it helps us better understand and, again, illuminate what's happening. The next slide, please. I've proposed a concept that I hope will guide everyone thinking about animals and work, and that's the continuum of suffering and enjoyment. So if we think of there being two ends of this continuum, happiness, enjoyment, and suffering on the others, depending on many factors, animals are going to be positioned somewhere along that continuum. So they could be at the suffering side and never leave it Everything that they're being asked to do is bad for their bodies and their minds. It is harming them. They are in a perpetual state of suffering. They could generally be in a state of enjoyment. The illustrative example I have there is a conservation canine. And so here, this is an organization at the University of Washington that takes high energy shelter dogs. You can see that's a herding dog is going to have a sort of an innate desire to move and be around and be finding things and active, and may not be ideal for sort of a home life, a less active home life. And so some of these dogs are harder to become adopted. And so this organization takes this high energy dogs and sees, would they be suitable for and interested in? I think that's the most important thing. Are animals suitable for and interested in particular jobs? This detection work. And so they partner with these dogs to help them detect signs of endangered species. So they're using the powerful sensory abilities of the dogs to identify elements in the feces or even the tracks or things that endangered species might be left behind, to assist with scientific documentation of the animal's locations. So that sounds like it could be a pretty good job that dog might be suitable for and interested in. It's connected to the dog's biological interests, intellectual interests. The working conditions are not going to be unreasonable. They get rewarded with the thing that is their favorite. It's usually a ball or a rope that you wrestle with. Whatever the thing is that the dog likes is the reward. That's where we're going to find more situations of enjoyment, where the dog is suitable for, interested in, perhaps even flourishing, to use the words of the philosophers, in a context like that. So those are two extremes, right? So a pig in a gestation crate who can stand up and lie down but not turn around or move for her entire existence. I don't know if these are legal in Finland. They're still technically used all over North America, though in some places they're being phased out. That would be coerced body work. Those pigs, that is miserable. They're going to be suffering the entire short duration of their lives. But lots is going to fall somewhere in between. So it might be also subject to change. That's what's really key about this continuum, is that we use it as a way to actively monitor how are animals doing. They might start quite close to the enjoyment. I like this job, I like this task, I like my coworkers, I like who I'm working with. But something happens. I become bored, I become sour, I'm sore, I hurt myself, I had a negative interaction with another horse this morning, and now I feel grumpy. All of these things can change where the animals work and where the animals feel on that continuum. And at some point, when you perhaps you started enjoyment and they end up suffering on a regular basis, you say, I think it's our duty to say, we need to think of a new position for you, or maybe it's time for retirement, or maybe it's time for you just to have a nice life of leisure in retirement, whatever that might be. This is the idea of, we apply this to make it animal-centric. Where are they fitting on this continuum? Recognizing the work and the experiences from their perspective, and how is it changed? Recognizing continuity and change, that it can change over time. Do the next slide, thank you. We also want to be recognizing what we call animals' voices or agency. No, they don't speak English or Finnish or Swedish, but they communicate. They can understand some of these languages. They communicate in a range of ways. They have a lot to say. A lot of well-intentioned folks say, oh, I'm the voice for the voiceless. And a lot of feminist scholars and others have critiqued that and said, well, not exactly. Animals have voices. They're just saying things in ways that are different than humans, and that we need to work to understand. And so what are they communicating? What are they saying about their experiences, about their interests, about you, about the environment that you're placing them in, about conditions, etc. We want to be increasingly attuned to what they have to say. And as part of that, scholars have really been growing their interest in animals' agency. So their capacity to think, their capacity to act. Sometimes that means defying an order if it's just to save someone or protect a situation. They're guiding a child with autism, for example, and the child is pulling them in a direction that's dangerous. The dog's going to exercise their agency and say, you're asking me to go that way, we're not going that way. We're going to go the other way. Right? So we want to be continually trying to see, what are animals trying to say to us, or what are they betraying through their bodies, through their behavior, through their relationships, or the lack thereof. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's very obvious. And what are they saying explicitly? And can we listen? And then can we really hear? Next slide, please. And if we want to listen and really hear, that invites us to act in solidarity. So I've proposed the concept of interspecies solidarity, which is rooted in empathy, but it becomes an ethical and political commitment. I like talking to Scandinavian and Nordic audiences because you're so much more familiar with the concept of solidarity, because it informs a lot of social life and social debate. And it's a concept we can certainly apply to other species. It does mean support despite differences, and someone does not have to be the same as you for you to feel solidarity with them. In fact, it's support despite differences. And as Val Plumwood points out, there can be some similarities and some differences. Similarity and sameness is not a necessity for solidarity. Not intended to be an imposition or a monolithic blueprint. It's not like I have the answer, here it is, impose it on all contexts, all situations, all dynamics, all cultures, all social groups. Rather, it's an invitation. It's an invitation and it's a challenge to question business as usual in order to see things from animals' perspectives, to see things from the perspectives of other people as well. But what's so particularly crucial about solidarity, and what makes it quite different from simple empathy, is that it cannot remain internalized. It requires us to act. So that can be relational in the immediate, or that can be in a bigger political sense. What do we need to do to enact this solidarity? Next slide. And as part of thinking about ways to act in solidarity with animals, I urge us to think about animals' work, but not only their work. So I propose the concept of work lives to try to put animals into their contexts. So the concept of work lives, there's comparable terms, work-life balance. I know in a lot of Northern European contexts, you talk about working life. It's in that wheelhouse, but specifically what I mean by work lives is that it's recognizing animals' physical and psychological experiences and well-being. That they are whole beings with minds and bodies and social lives and social interests. And recognizing these before and after their jobs. So what I mean by that is both on a daily basis. Before and after the job, on a daily basis, you work for these 3 hours. What's happening before and after? And over the course of their lives. So what that means is what happened before you began this work. What kind of training, education was there? What were the conditions of how you were raised? When were you taken from your mother? In the case of mammals, which is mostly who we're talking about. And then crucial, really crucial, what happens after their career ends. They've served a unit, they've served a person, they've served a public agency. For years, they're starting to slow down. Someone uses that continuum of suffering and enjoyment and says, they used to enjoy this, but I see they're getting sore, they're getting lethargic, they're getting less interested. I see that I'm going to listen to their voice. I want to act in solidarity, put all of the concepts together. What will be next? And ideally, we want retirement with dignity, leisure, the right to their own body, their own more control over their own time and their own lives. And how do we make that happen rather than, some of them get tossed into slaughterhouses, some of them get euthanized. I would call for an ethical commitment to the back end of animals' work lives. What happens after they have served people? So this means being attuned to things like their housing, their leisure time, how much and what are they doing? Their relationships, are they getting to interact with those they want to interact with when they're not working? What are their opportunities to have fun, to sleep, to rest, to do the things that are important to them? We want those things. Right? I mean, you're Finns, you know that. It's like you're not working all through the weekend. You're taking your 4 weeks of holidays. You or 6 weeks, maybe more. You have the right to those things. Well, how about animals do too? And how can we put that into practice? So that's why I think the concept of work lives in many ways is as important as understanding animals' work. Because for most of them, the formal work is only a small part of their life. It can be quite influential. It can have a lot of impact. What else is going on? And there's going to be a relationship between the two. If they're unhappy in one aspect, it's going to bleed into the other. And yeah, the same is true for these animals, us animals too, right? Next slide, please. So I've proposed what I call humane jobs, and this concept is intended to be it's an invitation to build a positive human-animal work project at a really, really practical level, which is how can we create work that's good for both people and animals, that benefits both people and animals. In general, it's going to be work that helps, not harms. That's a good guide, a good starting place, right? To figure out if something is humane, see if you would want it done to you. Animal advocates use that saying a lot. I think it's a pretty good starting place. And I proposed humane jobs to be pithy or short, sort of like good green jobs. You use the concept of green jobs, right? I think that's a fairly international concept of those jobs that are good for people and that benefit the environment. It's similar. I wanted it to be similar, and I actually think there's a lot to learn when we're trying to create more humane jobs from green jobs attempts and projects. What works, what doesn't work. You arrived in a community and thought we're going to replace these dirty, damaging, environmentally polluting jobs with something more positive, and the community was like, we hated our old jobs, but we hate these even more. Why? Right? What can we understand from those contexts? They're a really important lesson. And the concept of humane jobs also invites us to recognize inequities among people, too, based on class, based on ethno-racial identity, based on citizenship status, and that there can be intersections of damage and well-being, and that being attuned to those and attending to those is important as well. Do the next slide, please. So it's an interesting time to be talking about this. It's another reason why it's such a delight to be here with you. Academic research has really deepened and expanded over the last decade. When I started doing this work, there was not a lot going on. And now there's really good and interesting developments. And Finland is playing a very important role in this, so you can be proud. The PAWWS team, Linda, Astrid, JC, really globally recognized excellent research, really innovative use of anthropocentric concepts to animal concepts, development of new empirical data, new ways of thinking about this. So you can be very proud of yourselves and your colleagues and peers who are really setting a high standard. The key challenge now is how do we bridge conceptual insights and real world practice? And I think that's one of the goals of this very day, is to say, all right, so we do have some useful research, we do have some useful concepts. How can we put them into practice? Go to the next slide, please. And so I think it's important to talk about in Canada, in our research funding environment in particular, we talk about knowledge exchange, and I actually love that term, where we're exchanging knowledge, where we're recognizing that practitioners have insights and knowledge of value, and so do researchers. And how can we exchange knowledge for the best possible outcomes for animals and people? And so there are things that can be done. So we can create or strengthen organizational practices or policies to better protect animals. Develop organization-specific. I'm not giving you the answers. I'm saying because again, it's not monolithic. But let's say it's an organization that uses service dogs. What would be the specific policies that reflect that workplace and those animals and the specifics of their lives and the people's lives? And those could be developed, right? Building from human-centric policy, but expanding it by using some of these tools. But also, again, thinking about their work lives. Say it's organizations that are training or using service animals. How can we think about the concept of work lives to ensure the animals are being best protected on a daily basis and over the course of their lives? So there's real possibilities to strengthen policies and practices right here and right now in the immediate term. Perhaps more ambitious, but important, is creating or strengthening public policy and law. So if you look at the global context, there are some examples of labor-like protections. So I don't know of any actual labor law for animals anywhere in the world. And that could be a challenge, developing a labor law for animals, because animals' work is so diverse. creating one piece of legislation that captured all working contexts could be difficult. That said, there might be certain elements, key foundational elements that could be integrated into a sector-wide or a national law. But there are examples of labor-like protections that exist. So for example, communities that still have carriage horses that take tourists around or things like that often have some provisions that say they can't be worked when the temperature is above this number or below this number. Sometimes they're really basic, like they shouldn't be worked when they're injured. Yeah, no kidding. But perhaps you do need to spell that out. Mandating days of rest, things like that, mandating holidays, those sorts of things do exist. And then there are little bits of national policies or things, but this is a real area for potential. Now, depending on who we are and where we're located, one or more of these might appeal to us. The idea of trying to shape policy at even, a municipal, or what you might call local government level. Municipal is a very Canadian word, sort of a local level government, or a regional or national level might seem a bit daunting, but maybe there's something at the organizational level that could be done. Or maybe you partner with a couple of other organizations and say, well, if we did want to have a sector-wide policy, what might it look like? These are areas of possibility. Next slide, please. And a really key question, pair of words to guide so much of what we're doing, regardless of where we are, whether we're academics or frontline folks or policymakers, is if we're using all of these tools to try to decide a pathway forward, can what's happening be reformed to make it better for the animals? Is it pretty good, but X and Y need to happen? And if X and Y happen, we'll be fairly ethically comfortable with this? In which case we could reform that. Alternatively, do we look at a particular practice or an organization or a sector and say what's happening here is fundamentally flawed? It's not ethically defensible. It's not, no matter what you do, it's not going to be good for the animals. What do you do in that instance? Well, how could we replace it? How could we replace the animal use? So you see examples of this, for example, in using CGI and motion capture in the entertainment industry for, instead of using captive wild animals. So in the US film industry, for example, you're not going to see real lions, you're not going to see real bears, you might see real dogs. That would be an industry where they've said we can reform the practices to try to make dog actors' lives better. Dogs are pro-social, they're domesticated, we're asking them to work for 3 hours a day, we can make this ethical. But asking a bear or a lion to perform on a movie set is not defensible. We need to replace that. How can we replace it? We're going to create computer-generated images or use motion capture technology. So that's one example of how you can use this tool, the reform and replace, to say what is the best pathway forward that invites change, invites positive change. Next slide, please. And really key, I think, about this is how do we communicate? Are we exchanging knowledge? How are we communicating to new and diverse audiences? That can be intimidating. People use different vocabularies. They have particular assumptions. How do we transcend those divides and share our knowledge? In sessions like what you're doing now, when you get back to your communities and your universities and your workplaces, how do you engage in that in different ways? I'm finding that language, and I think effort and commitment and it's the spirit of generosity is the best way to do that. Is thinking about how do we not only exchange knowledge, but how can we translate it? How can we translate it into ways that will be understandable and accessible and to whoever we're trying to communicate and speak to and hear from? And so I would be remiss talking to an audience at this point if I didn't mention what I have been working on in terms of how to do this, which is that I have begun writing fiction. So my first novel is being published by Simon & Schuster, one of the world's biggest publishers, which is extraordinary, this fall. It's coming out in November. It is called The Tortoise's Tale. It's an adult novel. It's an eco-feminist novel. It's eco-fiction. It's the autobiographical memoir of a giant tortoise. And if you know anything about tortoises, they live a really long time. So she sees a lot. And as you're reading this, you might be like, she's talking about wild animals' work there. Oh, she's talking about animal agency. And yet I never use those words. It is informed by all of this scholarship and all of these ideas, and so much of what we're working on the front lines and in the world of animal studies, but making it an accessible, engaging, and an emotional narrative to try to reach even more people, to get them thinking about these connections, to get them thinking about solidarity and what that means and what that looks like. So I hope if you're a reader, you'll pick up The Tortoise's Tale. I think it's available for pre-order now anywhere. And it's a great Christmas gift, like Defending Animals. And as we continue to talk, we continue to think, and I think most importantly, we continue to care. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kendra. I'm not surprised at all that it was such an inspiring and interesting talk, as always. I feel like I'm always walking around with my fangirl flag, my Kendra fangirl flag about your work. It's such important work that you're doing, and I think definitely the novel is just like adding on top of that, like you say, reaching a whole new audience. And yeah, so definitely go pre-order that. Like, I don't know when it's coming out, summer reading, Christmas reading, something like that.
November 4th.
November 4th. Okay, so definitely a Christmas gift in that case. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so happy that you were able to come and speak with us. Does anyone have questions or comments or reflections? I see, Linda, you've unmuted, so